You open your phone. You put it down. You pick it up again. Nothing has changed. Nothing is interesting. And yet somewhere in the back of your mind, there is a voice, a quiet, persistent voice, telling you that you are supposed to be doing something great. That gap, that excruciating gap between who you feel you could be and what you are actually doing right now, that is not laziness. That is not weakness. That is one of the most psychologically complex states a human being can inhabit. And science has a name for it. Boredom is not the absence of stimulation. Your brain is almost never truly empty. What boredom actually is, according to psychologist John Eastwood at York University, who has spent over a decade studying exactly this, is a failure of attention. Your mind wants to engage with something meaningful. It scans the environment. It finds nothing that matches the scale of what it is reaching for. And so it stalls. It idles. It generates this low, grinding friction that people mistake for emptiness, but is actually the sound of a high-powered engine with nowhere to go. Now here is where it gets strange. The more ambitious you are, the harder boredom hits you. Not because ambitious people are weaker, because they are wired differently. Research led by psychologist Wienon van Tilburg at the University of Essex found that boredom is not a passive state. It is a motivational signal. It is your brain saying, what you are doing does not match what you are capable of. The more your brain believes you are capable of, the louder that signal becomes. Think about that for a moment. The person who wants nothing in particular from life rarely feels this kind of boredom. They sit, they scroll, they feel fine. But you, the person with the vision, with the ideas, with the sense that there is something you are supposed to build or create or become, you feel it constantly. A restlessness that does not respond to entertainment. A dissatisfaction that does not go away even when things are objectively fine. That is not a malfunction. That is your ambition becoming aware of itself. But here is where the psychology takes a darker turn. Boredom in ambitious people does not just create discomfort. It creates psychological damage, slow, accumulative, and often invisible. Researchers at the University of Limerick found that chronic boredom, the kind that persists even when you have goals, is one of the strongest predictors of anxiety, depression, and a collapse in self-concept. Not because boredom itself is the problem, but because of what happens inside the mind when you feel bored and know you should not be. Your brain starts to narrate, and it is not kind. When you have big dreams and you are doing nothing about them, or feel like you are doing nothing fast enough, the mind does not simply wait. It interprets. It assigns meaning. It says, you are bored because you are not good enough to start. You are bored because your dreams are too big for who you actually are. You are bored because you are failing at the one thing that matters most to you. That narrative is not the truth, but it feels like it. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the researcher who gave the world the concept of flow, spent 30 years studying what separates people who feel energized and purposeful from those who feel stuck. His answer was not talent. It was not even hard work. It was the size of the gap between your current skill level and the challenge in front of you. When the challenge is too small, you feel bored. When it is too large, you feel anxious. And when you have enormous dreams, but no clear bridge between where you are and where you want to go, your brain oscillates between both states. Bored because nothing in front of you feels worthy. Anxious because the thing that would feel worthy seems impossibly far away. This is sometimes called the ambition trap. You know what you want. You can see it clearly. And that clarity, that vivid, specific vision of what your life could look like, is supposed to be a gift. But it becomes a kind of torture when there is no obvious first step. When every action you could take feels too small. When you sit down to start, and your brain immediately compares this tiny beginning to the enormous finished thing inside your head, and recoils. So you do not start. And the boredom deepens. And the narrative gets louder. And here is what almost nobody talks about. This cycle is not just emotional. It is neurological. When your brain is bored, your default mode network activates. This is the system that runs when you are not focused on a task, the part of your mind that wanders, that imagines, that replays memories and simulates futures. In most people, a wandering mind produces mild daydreaming. But in people with strong ambitions and high cognitive engagement, the default mode network does something different. It simulates the future you want. It rehearses what success looks like. It puts that image in front of you, bright and detailed and just out of reach. Which means boredom, for an ambitious person, is not blankness. It is an involuntary slideshow of everything you have not yet built. Every time you sit still, your brain shows you the gap. And the gap feels like accusation. Neuroscientist Marcus Raichle at Washington University, who first mapped the default mode network in detail, described it as the brain's resting state activity. But resting does not mean calm. It means unanchored. And an unanchored mind with a powerful vision is one of the most destabilizing psychological states there is. So what do most people do with that discomfort? They reach for novelty. Not action toward the dream, novelty. A new podcast, a new show, a new plan they never execute, a new version of the same vision, slightly repackaged. Because novelty temporarily silences the default mode network. It gives the brain something to grab onto. And for a few minutes, the gap disappears. But novelty is not progress. And the brain knows the difference. After the novelty fades, and it always fades, the gap is still there. Wider now? Because time has passed. Because nothing was built. And the narrative returns, louder than before. This is the psychological mechanism that keeps enormously capable people stuck for years. Not a lack of intelligence. Not a lack of potential. But a brain that can see the destination so clearly that the distance feels impossible, and so it reaches for anything that simulates movement without requiring the vulnerability of actual beginning. John Eastwood's research offers something important here. He found that the antidote to this kind of boredom is not motivation, not inspiration, not waiting until you feel ready. It is what he calls meaningful engagement, the deliberate act of connecting present action to a valued future, even in a small, imperfect, incomplete way. Not finishing the thing, starting it, even badly, even slowly, because the brain does not need the gap to be closed to feel better. It needs to feel like you are moving. Movement, real movement, not planned movement, not imagined movement, but actual imperfect momentum, is the only signal that quiets the narrative. And here is the part that should stay with you. The boredom you feel is not evidence that you are wrong about your potential. It is not evidence that your dreams are too big or your circumstances too limiting or your timing too late. It is evidence that your brain has already committed to a version of you that has not existed yet. It is your ambition showing up before your action has caught up to it. Every person you have ever admired who built something real felt exactly this. The restlessness, the gap, the voice, the paralysis disguised as procrastination, disguised as waiting for the right moment. The difference between those who stayed stuck and those who moved through it is not that the second group stopped feeling the boredom. It is that they learned to read it differently. They learned to treat the discomfort not as a verdict, but as a signal. A flare sent up from the part of your brain that already knows who you are supposed to become. Tonight, you will probably feel that restlessness again. That low, grinding dissatisfaction. That sense of wanting more and being nowhere near it yet. And now you know that this is not emptiness. This is your brain running on a vision it cannot yet see. This is the cost of caring about something enormous. This is what it sounds like when the most capable version of you is already awake and waiting for the rest of you to start.